Thank you for having accepted this conversation. I was really interested to exchange with you, not only because of the presentation you did this year at FMX,
Yes.
but I think also I met you the first time you came at FMX. I'm not sure. I think you were with your husband and
Yes.
someone else. And we met like early morning
Yes.
looking at the presentation. Not sure if
Yes.
you recall.
I do. I do.
Ah, yeah. Nice.
Was that 2023 or 2024?
Yes, something like this.
Yes, that was our first time actually coming to FMX, and I love the festival, to be honest. And I think it was great that, weirdly enough, that was the first time we met, and then the next year I think we kind of spoke briefly, and then this year again you came to the presentation. So yeah, I mean, thank you so much for inviting me to the podcast, and I look forward to engaging with you. So thank you.
So a little bit of context. The conversation, what I'm really interested by is growth
Mm.
in creative industries
Sure.
and not necessarily crunching numbers, but really about how to grow the company through people, how we lead them and how we can keep them engaged into what
Yes,
we're doing, which is sometimes really nerve-wracking, as we all know.
that's true.
But maybe we can start with your own journey because
Right.
you didn't start it with VFX or animation, right?
No, I didn't. I mean, for me, my journey started as an attorney. But the funny thing is, like, I've always been creative as a person. I remember drawing in my room, singing. At some point, I even thought I could outsing Whitney Houston. I was like, I'm So I've always had kind of like a creative spark in me, and sometimes it showed in terms of my writing. But
Mhm.
when you come from the communities, and I'll be honest with you, Julian, when you come from sort of like a Black African family, and they've pulled all their resources for you to go to the best schools or the best university, for them, for you going into an artistic or a creative space is like, why would you do that? But for
Mhm.
me, law, I then went into law, of course, and I was in practice for some time. I loved it, but I felt there was something missing. And I felt that there was a greater, a bigger purpose. And so I think maybe like 4 or 5 years into my career as a legal, I decided to take actually like a year off and think through what it is. I don't advocate it for everybody. It's not for everyone. Don't do that. But I had the opportunity to actually take a year off and start thinking around what is it that I really want to do and how can I create impact? And to your point about
Mhm.
people, it was always about people for me. Whatever I did, I always wanted
Mhm.
to be connected to other people. And at that point, I felt my legal career wasn't exactly leading me into the kind of space I wanted to go. Then I started Chocolate Tribe. I started it with Rob, yes, who's my husband. And we felt that there were so many opportunities in South Africa. And those
Mhm.
opportunities were, while they were local and maybe continental, we saw aspirations for them going global. So yeah, my road to this creative space hasn't been straight and narrow. And I always
Mhm.
tell people that your purpose finds you. It doesn't matter where you are in life. It'll talk to you in small or low voices. And then over time, it becomes louder and louder. And for me, it became so loud that I quit my, firm and I started my own creative studio here in South Africa. So yeah, that's my journey.
So that was under risk, right? It was a bet, I guess, because from my understanding, actually, I work with a South African director, which was originally from Germany when I was working in Luxembourg, and it was all about shooting commercial for it was something like poker game or something like this. And so he told me there is a lot of shooting
Mm.
in South Africa, but not necessarily a lot of VFX house or post-production house. Back then, it was something like 15 years ago.
Okay.
And Thomas Nonreiser,
Okay.
if he hears me, yeah, it's basically back then he mentioned to me like, yeah, locally it was not necessarily easy to
Mm.
edit and finish the
Mm.
work because you're pretty high hand as
Yes.
a
Yes.
business. Like
Yes.
we're gonna overlay the reel on top of the conversation, but
Sure.
I was really impressed by the work,
Sure.
having an eye because I was compositor myself.
Thank you.
So, what was the risk associated to start Chocolate Tribe back then? Because it's been 10 years ago now, right?
It is. We're going into our 11th year. What
Yeah.
was the risk? I would say, what were the risks? Like, there were so many. I mean, the first big one, Julian, was that, to your question, your previous question about, coming from a different background and a different sort of career, was that a lot of people, including my family, were like, "Are you crazy? How can you leave
Mm.
like a great career, stable career, where there's status and there are jobs and you're going up the hierarchy in order for you to go into a space that is, for one, people don't understand animation, VFX and content. And back then, it was even more difficult to explain to people that there's a business case here or there's an ability to also
Mm.
impact people and create stories. So the risks were ones of everybody around you kind of saying, "You've lost your mind." I mean, I remember some of my family members saying to me, "What? It's going to be expensive, but you really need a good psychiatrist or psychologist because you've lost your mind." So it was
Yeah.
that kind of stuff where people just don't believe in this space or didn't believe in this space, and they see it more as a hobby. I mean, it's like you do it
Mm.
as a
Yeah.
side hustle or as a side gig. It's not necessarily a profession, You
Same level as DJing or something like this.
exactly teaching or even being a doctor. And for me, it was
Yeah.
it was kind of worse because and as I was explaining before, like when you come from our background, you're the one or two who've made it. Now you're throwing it away.
Mm.
How can you do that? So there were some people who were angry. There's some people who were like, she's lost her mind.
Got
And
it.
I'm sure it's this husband who's leading her down the wrong, route type of thing. So the risks were
Yeah.
were huge. And at the point, just also on a serious note, we have kids, and how can we go into this space where it doesn't have a sense of financial security? How are we going to pay the
Mm.
mortgage? How are we going to, pay school fees and all of that? And starting a business on top of that in an
Mhm.
area that is so, turbulent, it's so up and down as the creative space. So the risks were really huge, but we believed in what we were doing. And I remember our very first kind of like trip. We once we'd set up I'd set up the company in November. I remember the 7th of November, 2014, and like I was just sweating because I'm like, what am I doing? I mean, yeah, this is crazy. But what gave me a sense of hope in one way is the fact that both of us believed that we were doing the right thing and we were chasing after our kind of like best self and our
Mhm.
the deepest aspiration. That was the first thing. And then the second thing was because I continued working this is something that a lot of people don't know. I continued working as a lawyer on the side to make sure that I
Mhm.
was buffering the business. So it required me to not only while building this side, I was also securing, a financial stability for the family to continue.
Yeah.
And yeah, so the risks are huge, but I believe if you are one of those people that believe in your destiny and you follow it, yeah, you get the dividends, or it'll pay you in the long run. So yeah.
Definitely. And the real speaks for you. I mean, it's really impressive for me. It's those are exactly the inspiring career I like to highlight because that's what people need to hear. Sometimes you really like, I mean, especially with the previous guy you had, it
Yeah.
was like the most secure, best place ever to be for the parents' perspective, right?
Yes,
Or family security perspective,
yes.
but not necessarily for your inner flame, which apparently was still asking for more creativity.
Absolutely, it was. It was. And I mean, listen, it was like I keep saying, it was kind of like burning inside to a point where I just couldn't hold back. And the
Mm.
weird thing, Julian, again, was I found myself as the CEO and owner of Chocolate Tribe. I'm going into spaces that I wasn't trained in or didn't know how to do before I got this. For
Mhm.
me, that was really important because I trained as a lawyer and then I got into a creative space. I needed to learn how to deal with creatives. You know what I mean? They
Yeah.
work differently from lawyers per se. You know, in a legal
Hmm.
firm, there's a lot of structure and hierarchy. We were speaking a little bit about hierarchy before. There's a lot of hierarchy. Who gives decisions, how things needed to be mapped out. Creatives are
Yeah.
very dynamic. And so
Mm,
I needed to learn that vibe. And in the beginning, it wasn't easy, managing creative sparks that are going off at different times where I'm like used to things being a bit more logical and
yeah.
formulaic. So, yeah, look, there was a lot of learning for myself and I think I still am learning, to be honest. It's not just in terms of managing creatives, it's also developing businesses within the creative space. It's speaking the language. It's also kind of like figuring out where are the trends going, how do
Yeah.
you capture those trends before they fizzle? Are they going to fizzle? Those kinds of things. So there's a lot to learn still, but I'm enjoying the journey. I think that's the biggest thing right now. Yeah.
I read like a comparison, which is, let's say, orchestra and reading a partition
Right.
versus a jazz band where you have the member that need to improvise and create on the spot. Just
That's it.
maybe to compare
Yeah.
your lawyer kind of brain state to the, of creative company brain state.
True. No, there was a lot of kind of like improvisation, but but
Yeah.
but, but can I also just say like I do always give credit to my legal background. The first thing
Yeah.
is when I walk into a room, people take me seriously, and I'm not saying,
Hmm.
and I think that's also another thing that I advocate for creatives because I notice that sometimes when we go for either business meetings, creatives are not always taken seriously because they are seen as, oh, they don't understand the business. They should just stay in their
Yeah.
little corner doing the creative side. So for me,
Yeah.
being an attorney has given me that edge to go into rooms and have serious conversations and people take that seriously. But at the same time, I always joke, and I'm sure I've shared this joke before, where I say lawyers are like failed actors. So there is a
That's a good one.
so you have to tell a good story to get someone out of prison or out of a jam, and lawyers are good at that. I mean, so I felt the connection or the synergy between law and the creative space was always there. It
Yeah.
was so natural. I just needed to find the rhythm and, as you're saying, improvise along the way. But I felt the flow from the get-go. So I don't feel I'm out of my place. I feel like I'm actually living that destiny of being a lawyer as well as a creative person, and I love it.
Seems like just a different kind of performance,
Yes,
you know?
that's what I'm saying. Yeah. I have to wake up every day and figure out how am I creative with this. Luckily,
Yeah.
it doesn't have negative effects in terms of like someone ending up in prison or anything.
Yeah. The
It's
stakes are different.
the stakes are different, aren't they? Sometimes those stakes are great because they are on a script, right? And
Yeah.
I can heighten them. So
How was the collaboration or let's say the partnership with your husband in that story? Because that's also really interesting. Usually when you ask people around, they say don't do that with family.
it's true. So I'll be honest, in the beginning, I was very uncomfortable with working with, and we always kept our lives quite apart. I'd come back from my legal cases and I'd sometimes share a little bit of what, I've been doing. And I loved that. I loved the separation. And he'd come and tell me which production is working on, a new
Mhm.
technique in the industry. And that was great. But I think there was always, I actually did a course as part of my legal career. That's when I started seeing that there's a synergy between these two worlds. And it was called Law's Moving Image. And it was really about how film advocates and can move societal, sometimes
Mm.
injustices, perspectives, and all of that. And I
Mhm.
actually did a master's in law, but with that integrated in my sort of like thesis and all of that. And so just to get back to the point about working with Rob, it wasn't easy because two different people, many ways of working. But I think what put us together and still does is the fact that we've got a collective interest. And that interest is we want this thing to grow, we want it to succeed, and we want it to have an awesome impact for not only our family, but also the community around us. What it feels like sometimes, Julian, is that there's this great big responsibility on our shoulders to make it work. We want to be successful for our kids. We want to be successful for ourselves as very motivated and driven people. But bigger than that, it's about our community. It's about Africa. I mean, I always speak about Africa very passionately because I feel like it's this place where it's untapped and unknown. And as I expressed in the discussion that I was sharing, it's an enigma. People are either suspicious of it or they are interested, but they don't know how to ask questions because it might be offensive. But there's this thing around it. And so for us as a business, we want to break that shell and open it up and especially show the beauty and the amazing narratives that come out of this continent. So yeah, so I think that collective interest and love. By the way, my husband is not South African, nor is he African, So for him, he fell in love with Africa and I guess everything in it. So, that's
Yeah.
also so I think, that's also the shared interest that makes this so personal, but at the same time so big and so global for us. So yeah.
Yeah, and definitely changing the narrative. Actually, the perception of South Africa from outside, thinking of Chocolate Tribe, is like there is high-end shops there, if I can call it this way. It's like you can actually go there, shoot something, and have it finished, polished, and out for the broadcast,
Yes.
which is like firsthand. You would not think that way, right? But
Absolutely.
the company definitely proved that.
Yeah.
And what about talent? Because obviously you're, what's the term for that? Like a trailblazer, let's say, for post-production and animation in South Africa, but then you don't have a pool of talents available right off the bat. So how did you manage having your first employee, training them,
Yeah.
making sure they're up for the level, the bar that you raised quite high?
I think that's still a big challenge. By the way, thank you so much, Julian, for bigging us up with our high production. Our biggest drive here at Chocolate Tribe is to create excellent work that speaks for itself. So we really put a lot of love in the work that we do. We love our clients and we want to make sure that it's not just doing the job for the sake of doing it. So thank you for that compliment. I think for us, how we were able to sort of like hire our first and then our second and then our third, and before we knew it, we were like 30, and then we moved from 50 depending on the production, sometimes even more, is South Africa actually has a great deal of talent, but a lot of it is again untapped and unknown. And there were a number of people that we knew in the industry who were also interested in doing high-end work. And, we brought them in the team as well. Sort of little by little, I'm very cautious with relationships, especially when you're going to work together. So we were very mindful because we needed to be sustainable as a company. So we looked at their work, we looked at what they'd done before, we looked at the opportunity for them to learn, and we're very big on training. So I'll give you an example that every Friday here at Chocolate Tribe, there's a training session about something. Even an intern gives a presentation about something new that they've learned. So for us, training from when we started this company was really important. So when we hire people, we make sure that they are interested in learning more. They are not just going to come and be on holiday and start coasting.
Yeah.
So, and the time that we actually grew the biggest, if I can share that with you, was actually during COVID. We were about 15 just before COVID. And then all of a sudden, everybody was interested in animation because obviously filming on live action films became an issue due to COVID. And so animation became the space that everyone was interested in trying to figure out how can we continue telling stories. So we grew from about 15 people to almost 40, 50, and we were on the Disney Kizazimoto Generation Fire anthology. We were
Yeah.
one of those 10 teams that were chosen. So it's growing a studio is trying to get to know people and learning how they learn so that you can help them in everything that they're doing and grow them, give them the opportunity to be able to grow at the different paces that they might be in. So yeah, it's always exciting for me when we hire somebody. When I have to sign that document, I'm like, yes. So,
Yes. And at this stage, you start to have leaders of managing teams, right? Do you take care of that personally, or do you like make sure they have a leadership training on the side? Or what is your strategy for that?
So, I mean, I think the very first strategy on leadership for me, to be honest, is I need to be, the leader of myself. I need to be able to maintain myself because I honestly feel like every organization, its culture is determined by its CEO or by the head of that company. I hear
Yeah.
of certain leaders who, when they speak, people are so fearful and they're so afraid to come to work because it's like this very either highly hierarchical or unpleasant environment. So I think the first leadership trait for me is really to be able to govern your own self, to manage yourself. And then I think what's then really important is to get your managers or your supervisors to be, trained as well. And it's not just in terms of technical knowledge, it's not just in terms of like creative knowledge, it's also how to deal with people. How do you deal with stress? How do you deal with people who are not achieving, the quality that you want? And I think it's every Tuesday for about 2 hours, I sit with my senior guys and we just speak around what are the challenges, what are the things that we need to change. Are you having problems? I mean, and because I feel like we're still quite a small kind of family type of team. We
Yeah.
know each other well. So there aren't a lot of
It's easier.
levels. It's easier. Yeah. So it's still a personal connection. So I think for me, leadership is really starting with yourself. And when people see you behaving in a certain way where you don't lose your cool when things go wrong. Yes, you can tell someone this is not on, but you're not all over the place and losing your mind. You yourself have learned to govern yourself. I think it becomes easier for the team to also kind of, take that as an example. So yeah, that's how I tend to deal with things. Yeah.
I can imagine in delivery, really high pressure, just
Yeah.
having your pragmatic lawyer approach coming back, kicking back, like, guys, keep it cool. We're just gonna do this and that. I'm sure it helps compared to like a all over the place creative mind that would just freak out.
Sometimes they don't like me for it. They're like, loosen up, get angry sometimes, do something. I'm like, I don't even know how to do it, to be honest. So yeah, but it's great because I think even when people are upset, which does happen, like when we are under pressure, some of the team members lose their cool. But it's a moment to kind of like give them that moment to feel what they feel, but to come back to why we're doing what we're doing, So, that's just how we handle our things.
And I had a question for later on, but I'm wondering how much the culture, because you mentioned during your FMX presentation the notion of Ubuntu,
Yes, Ubuntu,
if I
yeah.
pronounce it well. Yeah. So wondering how much this translates within the team on site, because sometimes, based on my experience in different studio, different teams, from one show to another, the teams can be drastically different. Sometimes it's about, I just finished to read multipliers. So
Yes,
you have leaders
I love
that
that.
are
Yeah.
multiplier. Yeah. And other that are diminisher that just want to take control. It's almost like a mutiny
Yes.
on the show. It's like the best only survive kind of type of approach. So I really lived those two things. And that's why I'm really curious about how Ubuntu
Yes.
would actually translate
So Ubuntu is a African philosophy that loosely translated says, I am because you are. And really what it speaks about is the correlation between us and our humanity. So everything that I do must reflect that humanity. When I'm annoyed with you, when I'm cross with you, when I require you to deliver a project, I have to always consider it from the perspective of how am I affecting you as a person? And certainly when we're growing up, and I'll be honest, like from an African context, we are brought up in a collective mindset. While you're thinking about yourself, the first person you think about is the other person. Like, okay, how are they feeling? What is the reason that they're doing what they're doing? So we're brought up in a highly communitarian or collective culture. And I'll give you an example, even when we were growing up. So I grew up in Soweto. If you're walking down the street and you were doing something naughty, any mother who was from that area, if they saw you doing it, they could slap you or they could tell you off because for them, you are, it's sort of like that whole thing about a child is raised by a village.
A
And
village,
we
yeah.
still live in that kind of mentality. So even when we are in workplaces, we import that mentality of Ubuntu across the board, of trying to understand the other person from their perspective and where they come from. And for me, it's really important, especially when it comes to storytelling as well, because for us to be able to get stories that are highly authentic and that are nuanced and that are different and that share a kind of like a different perspective, we have to integrate Ubuntu across everything that we do, not just in our policies at work. It's how we tell stories, it's how we treat each other. So it's a philosophy that runs through our lives, to be honest. And sometimes it's shocking. I'll give you another example that when I met Rob, when he would trip on something, like we're walking and then he trips, and I'll be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." I'm like, "But you didn't do it. You didn't do. Why are you saying sorry?" I'm like,
Yeah.
we grew up where you empathize with the other person and you're invested in their growth and in their, sometimes even in their pain, because we are so connected as humanity. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, so I mean, I think that's really how we are socialized. And so, in a sense, that's also how we do our business. That's how we run our studio and how we want to grow and be sustainable as a business. So, yeah.
It's really weird to me coming from a French background and also part German. It feels to me that we all want that, but we're not able to live it. So what you just described, I think, is really at the core of everyone in Germany and France really like, especially around in France around dinner or lunch. It's like that's the moment where we lose, let's say, the behavior, and we just try to be as natural as possible and really care for each other. But somehow, then when you're back to reality, you play that game and you not allow yourself to show that you care for others. It's like a strength to be individual. But I don't think it's the nature of who we are compared to what you described. It's like you kept you remove the layer that doesn't help.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah,
Look, I mean,
that's pretty cool.
I love that in the sense that in one sense, I mean, like having interacted quite a lot with Germans as well as with French people and just Europeans in general, I think for me, I see sometimes the yearning of that community, but I also think due to like, I think the pressing needs of society where you can't show your emotions. And I guess also for
Yeah,
men, more so for men, like you can't show your emotions. And why would you care about someone you don't know if you're not connected by blood? Why are you bothered by that person? It's a waste of
exactly.
time and all of that. But for us, we believe in, and I guess also that's what I was trying to get across in my presentation. We believe in a connectedness, even with nature, that even if I don't know you, where you're from, for me, you're essentially still my brother. It doesn't matter,
Hmm.
or you are another human that's connected to me one way or another, even though we may not share the same surname and all of that. And nothing is taken away from me by helping you or by
Hmm.
engaging with you. So another example, I lived in the UK for a couple of years, and I would walk into the tube and I would greet everybody, and everybody would look at me and because that's how that's how we are taught. You walk into a place, like if I came into, I don't know, like if I saw you at the bus stop and you're sitting there
Yeah.
and there are a couple of other people, I'd say hi. And
Mm.
nothing strange. But when I was in Europe, that was so strange. And it took me so many years, and everybody would know that you just came, you just arrived, because after 2, 3 years, you stop that. You become,
Yeah, 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 that.
so it's those kinds of things where that you're in a different place and the culture is different. But like for me, I always carry, I think it's weird to even say I always carry my Africanness everywhere I go.
Yeah,
I'm just me in that way. I just, wherever I walk in, I'll say hi. I'll ask, how are you doing? And sometimes someone will be like, why are you asking me? I don't know you. Why are you asking me how I'm doing? You know what I
yeah,
mean? It's
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
it's that kind of
But
stuff. Yeah.
yeah, please continue because we just need to have a bit more fun about ourselves sometimes.
Sure.
That's what I like to do also, just breaking the ice,
Sure.
doing something stupid just to make sure people are not taking themselves too seriously sometime in events or stuff like that.
It's true.
Like I read that multiplier, that's a trait they have.
Mm.
They make fun of things. Even if they are really highly skilled manager,
Yeah.
usually they joke a lot.
It's actually one of my favorite books, Julian, Multipliers. My sister
Ah,
actually,
yeah.
yeah, my sister was reading it and I got a hold of it and I really, really love it. So I'm glad that you're talking about it because I actually think, especially in this space, people need to have a sense of humor across the board. Like, why are we
Yeah.
taking, I mean, as somebody said, why are we taking this seriously? None of us are coming out of this alive. Come on, we might as well
Yeah.
make a
Yeah.
joke. I know it's dark,
Exactly.
but yeah, so yeah.
Yeah, for me, it was a kind of, it's always something I had in mind, especially at
Yeah.
Rodeo FX Montreal, when I experienced that as a department manager. It was like for the same team of 5 people, if they are led or if the producer and the VFX soup is a multiplier, they are both multiplier,
Mm,
men or woman,
mm,
doesn't matter. The team can generate like 3 times
mm,
the work
yeah.
that the other team that have team miniature. And I experienced that several times. So
Mm,
it tried to find a way to put that on paper, but the book
mm,
did it perfectly. So I was
yeah.
like, "Oh, that
Yeah.
exactly
Okay.
that."
Yeah.
It was really cool to read that, like a revelation. It was
Yeah.
so cool.
No, it's all.
And definitively integrating that into Mon Expansion, which is all about that, is making sure every company has or want to nurture multiplier, then that's why I'm basically building the offer around. So, but back to Disney, you mentioned, so let's say we just cover Ubuntu internally, like how you work together, and then what about BizDev? Because that also, I guess, like Disney is a good example because that's international and it really looks good. I watch not only on the real but also on the TV show. They're really finding crafted animation. So how were you able to establish yourself as a strong partner with those kind of studios?
Mm. I mean, I always tell people that the first 4 years of Chocolate Tribe, we actually, I mean, if you're able to even look at our sort of marketing, we didn't market ourselves at all. What we focused on, Julian, was buckling down and doing the work. I mean, so
Mm.
we trained ourselves a lot. We went to conferences and different places, all of it in order for us to fine tune our skills. So first 4 years went about, look at us, this is who we are, what we wanted to do and what we wanted to achieve. I remember having actually a conversation with Rob, and I think about it and I'm like, I'm sure they thought I was crazy. And I was like, Every time people speak about VFX and animation in South Africa, what should come to mind is Chocolate Tribe, right? Just like when you're
Mm.
thinking about, I don't know, computers, the first thing that's on your mind will be Microsoft or Dell or whatever. And that's what I want for us. So, what I'm trying to say is, for us, what was really important is the caliber of work. Let's focus on the caliber of work, and clients will come to us. And
Mm.
if I'm also being 100%, within a year or two, we started getting quite high-end, jobs. Like our very first big production was actually with the UK director called Keyboard Taveras, and it's the Robot and Scarecrow. I think we did like 127, I stand corrected, maybe 29 facial replacement shots. It was the
Mm.
first time it was ever done in South Africa, but we didn't get any press releases around that, none of that. We just did the
Mm.
work and that's it. And that started creating a buzz globally. People were like, where's this company? Who are they? And we still didn't kind of come out and say, hey, it's us. So to answer
Yeah.
your question, the first 4 years, we really were about craftsmanship. It was about artistry. It was about creating pipelines, like fine tuning, even from software to hardware across the board, and creating a very strong infrastructure and team. And I think in a sense we were getting ourselves ready for the big time, if that makes sense. And how
Yeah.
we needed to do that was to create a really strong foundation. And that foundation was based on the people we hired, the caliber
Mhm.
of leaders, the infrastructure of the company. I often tell people from a financial perspective that, when we got our first check, I didn't run off and buy expensive shoes or an expensive dress because I was like, oh my God, we've made it. No, we invested all of that money back into the company, built a studio.
Mhm.
We've got 2 studios in Cape Town, and the one that's in Cape Town, we own it. I mean, and we were
Mhm.
very, what's the word? Like we were very strategic about
Yeah.
how we're going to use our money. We were not going to go and splurge on useless things. And of course, good shoes are never useless, but I didn't, spend my money on that. So it really was about the craftsmanship. It was the artistry. It was gaining the knowledge, but also not just the knowledge, the context. So when people call on you, you are a reliable partner and you deliver on
Mm.
time. So yeah, and we've had those partnerships with Netflix, with Disney, Amazon, and I mean until Amazon left Africa, and then Paramount. Currently, we're working on one of their shows at the moment. I think for me, it was just focusing on the work and connecting with as many people as possible in order for them to trust us and create those relationships to give us more and more work. So, yeah, and we continue doing that.
And would you say that many on-location shooting were also bringing work, or is mainly your network and your connection that was able to bring work to the business?
When we started, we were highly a service-driven company. So a lot of VFX supervision, a lot of taking on compositing work. And so that was our sort of core business. But as we
Hmm.
grew as a studio, we started also looking at what are the other value adds that we can put within the business pipeline. So developing concepts for client, like going to the beginning of production and not just being the end
Hmm.
solution. Even VFX on-set supervision was something that
Mm.
we started doing a lot more to say, hey, bring us in early so that we can
Yeah.
assist you with your production. But even before that, what we would also do is if we know that there's something cooking in the background, show us your script so that we could
Hmm.
be part of your team. So for us, it's always about engaging with client from the beginning so that we not only save you money, but we
Hmm.
also become part of your core team that you can rely on. And whatever it is that you may need along the way, we are there to assist you. So I think while in the beginning it was very much service driven and we would take small shots and smaller things, as time grew, it became bigger and bigger. And animation also became a big aspect of it, where we were not just servicing other companies. We're also
Hmm.
currently actually developing, I think, about 4 IPs with other partners in animation. So the business strategy is growing as we see different needs in the industry.
Yeah.
And we're constantly looking for fresh and new things. I mean, now with AI coming on board as well, we're looking at how do we fully integrate that into our business strategy. So,
And how much is there any support from the state? I'm just curious compared to other places.
you want to get me into trouble? No. No, look, and I'm very honest about this. In the beginning, we were very cautious not to involve too much of the government, and that was based on also like looking at other industry players who, either entangled themselves and then it became a problem. I think one of the biggest reasons why in the beginning we were not really keen on being partnered up with government activity was because we felt that the pace that we needed to move and to grow wasn't going to be the same pace as, government things.
Yeah.
Like they often take a lot
Mm.
longer and, have to wait for somebody else. And for us being
Yeah.
a small company, agility was really important. And we were also seeing how, the industry was changing really fast and we needed partners that were fast. About 4 years ago, Julian, I took the decision as the company that we really needed to broaden our partnership. And I've
Hmm.
been engaging with government a lot more now. And in fact, I recently got appointed to as a I'm trying to still figure out what the role means, but it's a role that's aligned to one of our government departments, the Department of Arts, Sports and Culture. And
Mm.
it's a new space, as in it's a new position. What they've done is to create sector boards for different areas of creativity. So I fall
Okay.
under the animation and gaming, and
Hmm.
the chairperson is one guy who, runs the animation SA, Animation South Africa, and then I'm his deputy. And the idea is that as industry players, we are able to influence the space in a more positive way. So it feels like the government is basically saying, guys, you know your industry better. You
Yeah.
tell us what you need. And
Yeah.
I feel like there's a more positive relationship now with government, and they, from a local level, they're also trying to help us with funding of AVIJOZI, which is the
Yeah.
festival we hold every year, and we're engaging with them on that. So it's a growing relationship, but it
Hmm.
hasn't always been that way. I'm just speaking honestly because for me, I think, it's, I have to always like be honest to viewers and the audience and people who are interested in starting these kinds of businesses, because you see this glossy, beautiful picture, or you see this
Hmm.
wonderful website with amazing work, and you don't
And
actually,
amazing offices.
and amazing offices, and you don't actually understand what happens behind the scenes and what are
Yeah.
the challenges, what are the, frictions that have happened. And we are only sort of having a sort of great relationship now with government because we feel that they're also starting to understand that animation, VFX, and this space is not,
Yes.
it's not for kids. They think it's a children,
Yeah.
especially with animation, they think it's for children. And why don't you guys grow up and do proper jobs type of thing? And so I think it's now that they're seeing the value and they're seeing the growth of gaming. And I mean, some of the statistics that I was sharing with you guys that for us in Africa, 1.5 billion people, and they're projecting by 2050 it will be like 2.5 billion, and 70% of those are going to be young people under the age of 30.
Yeah.
They're going to be African. So the government,
Accessing cell phone, accessing YouTube,
exactly.
any kind of online training. because I've learned the compositing, my craft as a compositor was fully online.
Yeah.
It was FX PhD. I bought it the most I could with a tiny job I went with.
Yeah.
So I never been into any school,
Wow.
and I have a successful compositor career.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's, I'm just thinking of Africa in that
Yes.
regard, saying, oh, they will have access to FX PhD through
Yes.
cell phone or whatever
Yes.
network that was maybe not available before.
Mm.
So the amount of talent and creativity they all have, the brute force also available.
I
It's, you
mean,
know,
I love that actually. Can I just speak a little bit about that brute force actually? Because I think
yeah,
that's also the differentiator between Africa and other places. Well, some places I think there's a similarity with Africa because we have not always had the sort of nice and comfy and easy road. So we've had to kind of brute force things. We've had to cut and
yeah.
paste. I often share the story of like sometimes when international productions come to South Africa, they bring two or three producers or four or and three, five gaffers, and you're like, here we have one gaffer, one producer,
Mhm.
and all of them know how to, do lighting and different things. And our ability to be multitaskers and multifaceted allows us to brute force things because we don't have the luxury of having all the different options. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
you have to crowbar things. You have to,
Yeah.
be innovative and creative for solutions. So yeah, I love that brute force concept that you're talking about because I see it every day in Africa because we're like, who are we waiting for? We're not waiting for anybody. We're gonna
Yeah.
make this thing move. You know what I mean? So yeah,
Yeah, it's like time to break that ceiling. It feels like a ceiling. I
yeah.
have a few friends in Cameroon, and they really feel also in terms of business they being constrained. Like one little thing is not having access to PayPal. They would like to
Mm,
receive payment. They cannot access PayPal. It's really simple, but he's in the music industry, and that's the way he get money. So sometimes I just receive the money for him
yeah.
and send him with tap.
That's
You
okay.
know, the thing with SM. So we're making team like this because I can access PayPal for him, and but sometimes I'm like, damn, he would just need access to that. So yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's just my rant against those services.
Wow, that's cool.
But I guess it's also why Chocolate Tribe is so interesting. For me, it feels like that company is raising the bar and being recognized as a really high-end company. So you don't need to bring your crew from another country. Everything
Mm,
is there. You can have your
mm,
production there.
mm,
Is there anything, because France, they brought back grants. Now it's
mm,
working well since 2 years again.
mm,
Montreal, they reduced grants.
mm.
Sadly, the VFX
Industry.
number of artists is reducing a little bit,
Yeah.
but still, I'm still moving back there
Okay.
in 2 months
Okay. Are you sure you're not moving to
because,
South Africa because of the Amapiano? Because like,
yeah, I definitely need to reconsider because my wife needs sun and Montreal is only 3 months.
there you go. That's a done deal. Come on. There's music, there's sun, good food, Ubuntu.
Yeah,
I mean, what else do you need? Like a
yeah,
great creative space. Yeah.
I just needed that conversation, I think.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Cool.
But what I meant is like the government in Montreal, they really got that creative industry is a moneymaker.
Mm,
And even though they turned down some grants, there's still the
mm,
video game industry.
yeah.
I think they're just switching the VFX grants to the immersive.
Mm,
They're really funding a lot
mm,
that new type of industry,
sure.
also animation, of course. Do you think that the culture shift is starting in terms of seeing that as a money cow
Mm,
compared to what as you mentioned, they thought that would maybe just a cartoon for kids
yeah.
back then. Do you feel the shift is already happening, or there is still work to be done?
I definitely think there's still a lot of work to be done, Julian, because I do think if I can sort of And this is not in a negative light. I always think in some ways it's sometimes good to be behind because you have the benefit of perspective and you won't repeat the mistakes of the ones that ran in front of you. You know, you see where the holes are. You're like, I'm not going in there. I'm going a different direction. So, I mean, I do think we are at least maybe 10, 15 years behind the sort of trends that are happening in other spaces. And why I say that is because it's only sort of now that even from a government perspective, are they seeing the potential within animation, even gaming? And I think VFX was always like a bit of like, what is this? You know, how, I
Hmm.
mean,
Hmm.
a lot of people consume content here from films and series, but people never stop to ask themselves, how was that made? Who is behind that?
Yeah.
How many people are behind that? And it's only now that we've been pushing and advocating and going to government meetings and showing people, and not just government meeting, we've been going to communities, like we speak to parents, we speak to teachers, like my crew. Actually, last week, the reason I lost my voice and I got sick was because I was actually at one of these meetups in Soweto, and it was packed, it was lit, it was like just, and people like are so engaged with animation and like, you know, interactive technologies across the board.
Hmm.
So I think in one way we are still lagging, but I feel like that might be a good thing because with all the sort of bust and booms that have happened in the VFX industry and I mean even in the animation industry per se, it gives us time to think about growth strategies that are sustainable for us. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that there's still some way to learn, and that also integrates our knowledge of how to do this at a larger scale. I think one of the challenges I shared, you know, in my presentation was scalability.
Hmm.
We have a number of really brilliant artists, but I remember when we were on the Kizazi on the Disney show, it was so difficult to get artists because all of us were using the same people. And so for me,
Yeah.
being able to scale to a mass level, like if you go to, for example, if you go to Germany or you go to France, you're going to get a glut of artists, you know what I mean? And you're going to be spoiled for choice because there's a culture of appreciating creativity. It's not seen like it's for kids. It's not seen like,
Hmm.
what is this strange thing that they're doing drawing and why can't you get a real job? So I think the long and short of what I'm trying to say is even in our communities, we still have to go out there and tell people, hey guys, there are opportunities here. There's a job, there's a career, and come to
Yeah.
our studios and see that it's actually, we're not sitting on the floor eating marbles or, you know, because maybe that's what you think we're doing as creatives.
Yeah.
It's a proper business. So in one way, I do think we have, let me not say a long way, we have some way to go, but we are
Yeah.
bridging the gap and we're trying to answer real, you know, social questions in terms of animation, gaming, VFX, and content. As I mentioned, South Africa has like a 45 to 55% unemployment rate amongst young
Hmm.
people. And we are seeing this space as a potential answer to that.
Hmm.
And that's why government is also engaging with us because they're like, okay, you guys might be onto something because young people are already in this space. So how do we create and incubate businesses into this space
Yes.
and grow them so that we can answer economic questions, you know,
Yes.
poverty.
It feels to me you're gonna skip the model that is dying now,
Mm,
like traditional pipeline, to almost embracing the AI type of work. That could be also an opportunity. I'm just thinking the
mm,
same thing. Like when I say we, it's like France and Germany.
mm.
Like took a long time to put cable for the internet. You just skip that straight to 5G. So now
Exactly.
it's like the same for VFX. We're not gonna replicate what doesn't work anymore. We just straight to AI.
Exactly, exactly. And then you move
So
along. That's it.
maybe starting from behind, but maybe being a leader in few years
Yeah.
compared to other studio. Who knows?
We're pushing
And
for
that's
that. We're
actually,
pushing for that.
that's maybe a perfect segue to discuss a little bit Avijozi,
Mm,
which the trailer, the reel is really good. I'm just trying to understand, is it to interest new talents to VFX animation, to just explain what it is, or it's really can you just explain a little bit what was the idea, the initial thought about it?
Sure. What was the initial thought? I'll tell you, there's a kind of joke that goes around in this studio that you don't tell Nosipo an idea because she'll execute it. So what happened with AVIJOZI, I was listening to a lot of people in the industry frustrated and talking about there's no event in Johannesburg, nothing ever happens, nobody takes us serious in the animation, in the VFX space. Cape Town, always has the stuff. They're always doing fun stuff, and they have an animation event and all of it. And I was like, well, why don't you guys do it? Why are you? And we spoke about it, I think for 2-3 years, people kept talking about it. So I got fed up, I'll be honest, and I said, I'll do it. I'll do it. And I'm like, I've never really curated or created an event except my kids' parties, which always end up with someone crying and putting soap in their eye.
That sounds familiar.
Yes. So I was like, okay, whatever, I'll do it. How hard can it be? I mean, really. So, and at that point, we're actually doing a number of productions with Netflix. And I was like, you know what? I'll just throw it out there. Let me ask them. Maybe they would be keen partners to help me. So I sent an email to one of the guys that we were working with from Netflix, and I said, hey, would you guys, I've got this idea. I want to start this event. This is the name of it, and this is what we would want to do. Are you interested? And took them about a week and a half to respond. And I was laying eggs that whole week. I was like, oh my God, maybe they're going to cancel our jobs because why did I mix? You know, like you have all of these things going on in your
Yeah.
and then a week later, they're like, we love this idea. Tell us more. And I'd put a pitch deck together. So the long and short of it, Julian, was AVIJOZI was really meant to be a space where creatives, particularly VFX animation and gaming, people could come together and collaborate, but also potentially get jobs and hire each other, but also for the younger generation who don't know anything about animation and VFX to create awareness for them and opportunities for them. And AVIJOZI has become almost like it has taken a life of its own. Now it involves three main initiatives. The first one is we do road shows where we go to schools and we go to universities and we speak about the artistry, the technical side of VFX and animation, AI, and across the board. And so that's the first portion of it. The second one is we've started like a skills to job program, which we're going to launch in the next few. And that's meant to, teach people about visual storytelling. Unreal Engine, as you and I know, Unreal Engine is the sort of, it's become the it kid that's across the board. And so we're also getting into training people into that. And then the last part of AVIJOZI is the festival, where we also want to celebrate, the creativity that comes from this place. I feel like VFX as well as animators are the step kids in the film industry. They're the ones who are made to sit at the back. When the credits are almost finished, they're like right at the bottom. So for me, AVIJOZI was also paying homage to the creatives who are not necessarily always given their props. And so it's a celebration. It's a place where we can convene. And when it started, that was sort of like the main big idea. But it's grown now. We've got producers that come to AVIJOZI. We've got directors that come to AVIJOZI. Some of our colleagues from FMX were at AVIJOZI.
Imke, I think I saw her.
Yes, Imke was there. Matthias was there. Shuzo. I'm trying to remember everybody. But there were a number of people that and we are trying to connect the continent with the globe as well through these festivals, because we want to say, hey, it's not just stuff that's happening in Germany. or in
Yeah.
France. It's also happening here. Come and pull up, like come and listen to our piano, have some braai, and enjoy our pop and our dance. And in the meantime, let's create amazing content together. So AVIJOZI is kind of like a game changer and narrative changer in terms of we want to show people that we're not waiting for anybody to change our fortunes. We're doing it ourselves, and we're celebrating that. And we want to invite the rest of the world to come and, enjoy it with us as well. And hopefully what comes out of it are jobs for young people, collaborations for studios amongst each other, and yeah, just a lot of fun. And maybe the thing that I can say about AVIJOZI, when I invited even our competitors, people said, "Nosi, you're crazy. I mean, you're inviting all of these competitors to the same meeting where your clients Netflix is there, the people that you get work, the production companies that you get work, they'll take your work." And we're like, we feel like we've done the work, in terms of securing those relationships, delivering great work. This for us is a almost a gift to our community to say, please come and witness what we are trying to do and enjoy it. So that's AVIJOZI for you. And this year it's going to be on the 13th and 14th of September. It's a 2-day event, and the theme around it is Heart of Steel. And that theme was really intentional because we want to inspire people to be courageous and have a heart of steel through these very difficult times that we all are experiencing as creatives. And then the second part is the heart of steel is the integration of the human centric Ubuntu with the machine. How are we going to?
Yes.
And yeah, so we're hoping if you're in the neighborhood and you're able to come,
I'll definitely make room for it.
please do come up. It's
Yes.
just is a vibe, and it's a wonderful place to be as a creative as well. So yeah.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And it's I think through events that's the best way to promote the culture and the craft. Yeah, it makes so much sense because I'm also a lot about events.
Yeah.
I was working with Hub Montreal, which is basically a marketplace where it is more about showcasing the creativity of all rather small or mid-sized business in Montreal.
Okay.
Like whatever they created as immersive content, a little bit of VFX, but VFX has their own event. And it was so cool because it was 2019 and I was just knocking on every little shop doors.
Yeah.
Sometimes, let's say from 10 to 100.
Yeah. Oh.
And it was so cool because those are the ones that are creating like the really interesting content for whether public space, museum, cities, airport, all those things involving digital creativity. And then you had for 3 days, it's still happening. I think it's happening in November. Basically, buyer from all over the world coming in and buy those content.
Oh, that's amazing.
And all to an event. So I'm really about events. I think it helped a lot to speed up and for the networking also. I think FMX is quite good for that.
It is.
It was really, really good.
Look at us now. We're on a podcast because of FMX.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No, that's amazing. So do you guys have a lot of events in Canada that are around this space? So
I've been out for 5 years now, returning after 5 years. I think there were one event, VFX Cafe, but it was not necessarily so successful. So I'm not sure if they continue to do it. But there is also the VES chapter over there, which is quite cool. So you have sometimes parties. The one in Germany was pretty good. We have a lunch at FMX.
Okay.
So not sure if there is one you're already started in South Africa.
We've been talking. Can I be honest? We've been talking about it because the VS conversation has been going on with Nancy, and in fact, they just featured us in one of their the spring edition, and we've been talking about this, and I think it's just trying to figure out, especially now with everything going on in the VFX industry, how to platform it so that it impacts the way they would want it to impact, but also the way that we would want it to impact our community. So there is talk, but yeah,
Yeah.
we just have to move it a little bit. You know what I mean? So
And
um,
I have the impression that they have to evolve too somehow
yeah,
because they're really
yeah,
traditional
yes,
based, you know. So
yes,
it
yes.
would be also
Yes, that's what I was trying to get at, but I think I was trying to find the right words because I mean I think it's really wonderful, but there's so many changes and leaps, and they're uncomfortable, but those leaps have to
mm,
be made for us to be able to interact with even international organizations. Because if they don't make sense in your community fully, it'll be a waste of
yeah,
time and
yeah.
be no bandwidth for it. So we're looking into it. I think it's wonderful, and we don't want it just to matter to us. It must matter to everybody.
Well, VES in Africa translates by AVIJOZI. So
Oh,
you're all set.
okay, good. I like that. I'm writing it already down as a plan.
Which stand for, can you remember me what AVIJOZI stand for? I think animation, VFX
Yes,
in
interactive,
Johannesburg. No,
interactive,
interact
interactive in Josie. So
in Josie.
actually, so once you've kind of been to Johannesburg for a while and you feel like you're a local, you call it Josie. So it's the
Yeah,
sort of
yeah,
nickname for Johannesburg, which is Josie. But if I'm
yeah.
being honest, Julian, AVIJOZI is not just about Johannesburg. It's a movement that I really wanted to start. It's a mental movement where I wanted people to understand that Africa is changing its narrative, and it's doing that through creating awesome work and
Mm,
creating awesome businesses and bringing people together. So it's not just located in Johannesburg. It's a
yeah.
global narrative that, we're pushing through. And yeah, so while it stands for animation, visual effects, interactive in Josie, it's a very global event in the way we see it in our head.
I really need to find a way to come because actually I've came to South Africa for my honeymoon,
Oh, really? Oh my God. You see?
but it was really the most beautiful trip. But at the
Uh,
same time, I felt like I missed Africa because I was in my bubble.
I know.
So I felt like I need to come back and speak to people and be
Yes.
closer because
Yeah.
it felt like amusement park kind of
Mm,
approach, which I don't like so much. I prefer to really connect. So yeah,
but when
Ivy Josie
it,
might be the occasion.
it might just be the occasion. Let's make this happen,
Yeah,
Julian. And
exactly.
listen, so where did you go? Did you go to Cape Town only?
Yeah, it was the no, it was the trip to from Cape Town moving.
Got in.
Swaziland was also something interesting.
Okay.
Then moving to Kruger Park and Johannesburg. It was organized by an agency, so it
Oh,
was
I see.
it was beautiful, but it
Okay.
was not the real Africa. Let's say
Okay.
it was more a postal card.
Oh, it's so weird. It's so weird because I always tell people, and I had an experience, and I'll share with you briefly. Not before, because I was doing it in conjunction. I used to own like a fashion store as well, and
Oh,
yeah, because this creative thing just kept making noise in my head, and I had to
yeah, I
make it
see.
happen. But this American woman walks into the store and she looks very like kind of annoyed, confused, and just all over the place. And we're like, ma'am, are you okay? What do you need? And she's like, I'm looking for souks. Like, where are the African stalls? Like, this is not what I was told about. This is not real. You know, and my shop was in a mall. So we're like, what is she
Yeah.
on about? And she's like, no, no, no. This is not what I signed up for. I'm looking for real Africa. You're like, okay. So it's an interesting conversation because I think, especially South Africa, this is the thing. When you come to South Africa, sometimes people don't feel like they've got an African experience because South
Mm.
Africa is very, should I say, Western in a way? And so
Especially Cape Town.
Cape
Especially
Town.
Cape Town from my perspective. Yeah.
Sometimes we joke again about Cape Town that you need to get your passport when you're going to Cape Town because it feels
Yes.
like it's another country outside of South Africa or even Africa type. So I mean you're gonna get certain areas in South Africa as well where it's untouched. It's in the
Mm.
villages and all of that. But more and more in South Africa, there is less and less of that kind of sort of ultra rural or
Yeah.
I mean, you can go to certain places like where there's just wildlife and all of that, but now that's
Yeah.
also like a curated
Yeah.
experience. So, and I know having traveled to other parts of Africa, so I've traveled to Cote d'Ivoire, I've traveled to Kenya, and you can still see that sort of integration of the modern as well as the very sort of like purely natural and all of that. South Africa is kind of there but not there, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So people often say, "No, give me the real Africa." I'm like, "Are you sure? Are you sure?"
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah, for me, it was more about talking to people because
yeah.
usually I'm backpack
Oh yeah.
and sleeping at someone's house and
Yes.
having the real experience about how
Okay.
you cook food, how do you,
Yes.
that's what I was missing. It's like, oh no, it's basically continental menu
Oh,
all
I
over
see.
the
I
place.
get you. I understand what
Yeah,
you're saying. So we'll take you to Soweto. Ask Imke. We
there we
take
go.
her to Soweto. She didn't want to leave, hey? She did not want to leave. I was like, Imke, it's 10:30. We need to drive back and go home. I need to take your ass back to Germany. And she was like, no, I want to stay here. So yeah, I mean, like we can totally do that. I think for everybody who comes to South Africa needs to experience, the authentic,
Yeah.
African experience. So yeah, why not?
So speaking of which, what is next for Chocolate Tribe? What is your plan? What is your goal?
Yo,
What are your goals?
what are our goals? Look, I think from let me start from a sort of vision perspective. I think for us, our biggest vision is to continue creating amazing work that will change that narrative that we're constantly talking about. And we put our minds and our hearts and soul into that. Currently, our sort of big practical sort of like goal is to create more content in studio. As I mentioned before, we've got about 4, 5 animated IPs that we're working with other partners. So we're pushing through on that. And then also live action. I also mentioned the fact that we started off as a service company. So for us, it's also creating different strategies to harness our growth and a sustainable growth, but also bring in more communities. I think for me, really, that's what it's about. How do we bring our community to this story so that it's a lot bigger, it's a lot more sustainable, and we continue telling stories that from the heart and from the soul and are honest and are about lived experience as South Africans or people who grew up in Jozi and across Africa. So I think our next big goal is really to deliver the projects that we have started. It's to try and hire more people, Julian, because to, answer that whole thing I was talking about with the unemployment rate in South Africa, we want to see how we can change our country's trajectory from going to what people often will see as a failed state. We want to be part of those solutions and not part of the problem. Yeah, I think we also want to be successful. I want to be able to buy those pairs of shoes somewhere along the line.
Those shoes.
Those shoes, yeah. So,
But let's say I'm a young, let's say straight out of school. I'm really passionate about creativity, digital creativity as a whole, whatever might be painting, animation, compositing. What is usually the thing that prevent me to learn the craft and to
mm,
join a company like Chocolate Tribe? Just thinking of what is the usual struggle that
yeah.
people, like young people, are going through
Yeah.
in order to reach the level that you need.
So the struggle, I think, starts from, and I mean, I sort of like spoke a little bit about it, that we come from communities where this space is not necessarily seen as a viable career. So from your home, if your parents and your community is telling you, hey, you're wasting your time, get a real
Yeah.
job mentally. And I've heard a lot of stories with artists, and sometimes they come in here and they're like, oh my God, this is actually real. This is a real job. I always wanted to do this, but I was told I
Yeah.
was just being nonsensical. So I think it's
But it's the status.
Exactly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's that whole thing that from a home level, we are told that this is not really worth anything or it's not going to
Yeah.
amount to anything. I know that's changing now because we're also talking to parents, to teachers, and community leaders to say, hey, if your child is sitting and drawing, they're not wasting
Yeah.
time. They're actually crafting narratives and they're actually changing the image of how they see themselves, but they also see the world. And that there's magic in that. So that's the thing.
And how much, sorry to interrupt,
No
I'm just
problem.
curious, question is popping up. How much streaming services are being successful in South Africa, like Netflix and others?
I mean, Netflix is quite well known, and then there's and it's very popular here. And then there's Showmax, which is actually funny enough, as a part French guy, you should know it's actually merging with Canal Plus.
Yeah.
Yes, so Showmax was actually a sort of South African continental streaming service, and it actually was the most popular continentally, to a point where I think Netflix is also fighting for that position. So there are a lot of
Got it.
opportunities. So it's not an unknown space, but we do
Yeah.
still struggle with distribution. When you've created something, where does it go? And
Yeah.
how do you get there? So I think it's more the processes. But the point that I wanted to just quickly share, some of the struggles, it's not just at home, the education as well, Julian. Sometimes the teachers are not always necessarily giving, like, maybe it doesn't happen in Canada or in Germany or in France, that when budgets shrink from the government, whatever, art is the first thing to go. I mean,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
kids are not given that ability to express their brilliance through art because the art programs get shut down. So that's another obstacle. So a young person who wants to come into this space finds themselves almost lonely and they're like, how do I get to this? And then the other obstacle is that the education, like if you get to animation school, it's expensive. You know what I mean? So it's for the elite kids who are well-heeled and come from rich families. So if you're coming
Got it.
from a background where you don't have money, and it's going to be difficult for you to go to that school. And let's say you make it and you go to animation school, the resources sometimes, the software, you know this, that the software and the hardware to do what we do is extremely expensive. And we
Yeah.
buy it in US dollars. Hey, it doesn't change just because. And if we want to do the high caliber
Yeah.
work,
True.
so imagine a young person sitting in their room thinking, I want to be a VFX either supervisor or I want to be a rigger. How are you going to do it if you've got a low performing computer? Or,
CPU. Yeah.
you know what I mean? How are you going to do all of those things? So there's a whole lot of issues or obstacles. But what we are doing in terms of also AVIJOZI is to go out to schools. We are engaging with government and we're like, bring them to come and intern at Chocolate Hub. We've got the resources. Come and spend
Yeah.
2 weeks with us, a month with us, job shadow. So we do a lot of job shadowing with
Yes.
schools. We do internship for those who finished their training at animation school. They stay a month or two. And then from that pool, if we see that there's a raw talent, we then will hire that person and they become, I mean, we've got about maybe 5 to 10 artists that came from the animation school. Some are self-taught. They didn't go through the years. There are a number of obstacles. We're seeing a change in mentality where I sometimes even have parents coming to drop off their grown-up kids because they want to make sure that this is a real workplace,
That's difficult to imagine from my perspective.
I'm telling you real stories here. You've got parents,
Wow.
sometimes the parent, you can see that they're like, please try and convince them to not come back tomorrow because I'm not sure how. But when they walk in and they actually see it's a proper setup, we actually sit on chairs and we've
Yes.
got
Yes.
proper desks. We're not, like I said, we're not sitting on the floor or on bin bags. I mean, you can if you want to,
Yeah.
but
That's your choice.
that's your
But
choice.
that's also it's also where your lawyer background helps because you have that a layer of let's say, seriousness or actually like validity.
Yeah.
That maybe someone would be in baggy and t-shirt random like that would be maybe more difficult to convince the parents.
I guess, especially if they have purple hair and I don't
Yes,
know, a nose ring, and then the parent is like, I'm not sure my child is safe here. No, but look,
so it
we,
actually worked great.
yeah,
Maybe one day when you even bigger, not sure if the academy would be something that you would put in place. That's a huge investment. So
right.
I guess it's a big risk for a company, but who knows?
Who knows? We've been thinking about it actually, if I'm being honest, and we like part of the courses was us kind of feeling out and testing the waters to see what appetite
Yeah,
would be in the industry. So we are thinking about it, especially when it comes to notching it up a little, because as a high-end studio, even when we do get candidates from, for example, university or animation school, we still feel like there's a
yeah,
mismatch in the skills, so we still need to train them.
yeah.
So we were thinking of like something like a master class for those that you
Mm.
can see that this person has got it, but they just need to be pulled up a
Yeah,
little bit. Yeah. So we've
the
been
right
thinking about.
environment.
Yes, absolutely. Um,
Because also during the presentation, and I watched the animation movie before coming to FMX,
mm,
Flow,
yes,
the story of the cat. Not
yes.
sure if you saw it. It's absolutely amazing, and it's all made on Blender, which is a free software. And I was like, damn, that's actually. And I have a friend also, Arne, which doing a lot of commercial, fully on Blender,
Wow.
almost final composite. This is a door this is opening compared to full license. Of course, Unreal is the main one, but
Yeah.
Blender is taking more and more seriously. And I guess the computer part will be cheaper and cheaper, hopefully at some point. So maybe at some point the piece will get together for those kind of things. I'm really seeing that coming the next 10 years,
Mm.
because the pain point that you have maybe now might disappears
Yeah.
along.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think when it comes to the alignment of technology and artistry, that gap is slow. Well, maybe let me say quickly closing. I think
Yeah,
the gap that we still are pushing to try and close quicker is the acknowledgement or the acceptance that this space is an actual career. I mean,
yeah,
and it's not
yeah,
plan B, or it's not,
yeah,
you know what I mean? So that is where the biggest gap. I've been invited to, about a year ago, I was invited to a women's conference. And when I walked in, it was a bunch of lawyers and accountants. And when I introduced myself that, hey, I used to be a lawyer, and then I went into the creative space, all of them were looking at me, and they had a long conversation. After the session, about five of them came to me and like, how did you get out? How did you get out of, it was almost as though they were trying to clear me out of this jail. I'm like, tell us, like, what did you
yeah,
do? How did, and I was like, guys, there's so much that's changing in our spaces, and there's so
yeah.
many opportunities. And for me, I took the chance because I saw something new and different. And so I think if we're able to change perceptions and mindsets, that's the differentiator. And so even for us right now, the biggest gap is really that people don't see this as a viable career. They look down on it as though sometimes the other example that I will make in terms of money, the way that our films are funded, it's not through a like most of the time, it's through grants, like going through a
Yeah,
grant system. And that's like almost like charity. I mean, and
yeah,
which
yeah,
business functions on that? How can I, like, if I wanted to create like a flow, I need investors. I need proper backing from financial institutions. Banks here won't fund your film. There are specific development banks that have been set up to help the film industry. But even then, there's such a disconnect from a financial perspective. So I think if we can
mm,
change that mindset to say, storytelling and creativity is a huge asset. It might not be
mhm,
tangible. It's not, I don't know, it's not a laptop per se, but what comes out of it is just so much. It's so much
Yeah.
magic. And so for me, Julian, that's the gap. That's the biggest gap that we have to bridge, because the one between technology and knowledge, I feel like in time we will be able to close it. It's more
Yeah.
people changing their mindsets about this space and seeing it as a real proper career that you can live off and enjoy and be a wonderful person and wake up and tell brilliant stories that will transport people to different places. So
Yeah, it's really funny because, from my perspective, saying I worked on Star Wars or movies, like really prestigious,
yes,
you're like, oh yeah, you almost like brushing
yes,
your shoulder like this. But what you describe is quite the opposite.
yeah.
But I think you're the perfect ambassador for that, changing this mindset. And the
Thank
word
you.
I was looking for at the beginning of the conversation is, I think you're a pioneer,
Oh wow, thank you.
which is no, really, because that is, it didn't exist that way before,
Yeah,
and now it's happening. So
yeah. Thank you.
really, I think, I guess it's to close the loop of the conversation is really to end with that,
Thank
because it's really impressive. And I think you're really creating a movement. I think, as you said, it already started. And I think we're going to be surprised how we're going to evolve. I'm pretty sure.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that. I really appreciate it. I have never really considered myself as a pioneer. For me, I was just driven, and I continue being driven about changing the fortunes of, my community, and just telling amazing stories that are done well. So I appreciate that compliment. And yeah, thank you for inviting me to this. This has been like such a wonderful conversation, just free and open.
Flowing.
So yeah, flowing. There you go. It just flowed beautifully. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. I really do.
Well, my pleasure. My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time, and really, let's see what the future holds.